Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Thank you for joining us. We begin this hour with Super Tuesday calls in 2 states. CBS News projects Senator Bernie Sanders will win his home state of Vermont, and former Vice President Joe Biden will take Virginia. 16 delegates are set to be awarded in Vermont, and 99 delegates are at stake in Virginia. Later this hour, polls will close in North Carolina. 110 delegates are up for grabs there. For more, I want to bring in Joel Payne, Leslie Sanchez, and Molly Hooper. Joel is a CBS News political contributor, Democratic strategist, and former Hillary for America senior aide. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist. And Molly is a CBSN political contributor. Welcome to all of you. All right, just get reaction right off the bat from you, Joel. Virginia for Joe Biden. What is your initial reaction to that?
I think that makes some sense,
Yeah.
Especially when you consider Northern Virginia, a lot of those D.C. suburbs. We talked a little earlier about the New York Times daily the podcast earlier today, and how that really reflected, I think, a lot of anti-Sanders sentiment out there, particularly in that area. I would imagine that
was a voter in Arlington,
Alexandria,
County,
some of those bedroom communities outside of D.C., I think that reflected probably an advantage for Biden, also with the consolidation of the other candidates in the race. Also, there's a pretty significant military vote in the Newport News, Norfolk area, kind of Tidewater region of Virginia as well. So that might reflect the kind of more moderate conservative part of the Democratic electorate coming through.
And actually, Vice President Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, just had a big rally in that area, the Norfolk area, on Sunday night with Terry McAuliffe, former governor of Virginia, Tim Kaine, current senator of Virginia. So he had, after South Carolina, a lot of endorsement, a lot of energy in that area, but also in the more liberal district up where I live in Arlington. He had several members of Congress in that area, like Jennifer Wexton, who took out Barbara Comstock, a Republican, but represents that area, Democrat as well, and a number of the other Democratic members of the congressional delegation came on board with Joe Biden in the last few days.
Yeah.
The interesting part of that is suburban women are going to be a big part of that, because you mentioned Barbara Comstock. That was an area suburban women were really critical to the Virginia 10 race in 2018 and losing that really critical Republican seat. Right. Comstock's one of the best members that we had, for sure. But the tea leaves may start saying that many of these suburban Democratic women are feeling they don't want a revolution, they want to restore kind of the calmness and the understanding of what they're buying into.
And that's reflected here. This is our CBS News figures on how Biden won. You see 75%, to your point, Leslie, saying that they want to return to Obama's policies. These are Virginia Democratic primary voters. So that would seem to sort of underscore your point, perhaps.
It's true. And Virginia is one of those areas when you talk, if you looked up establishment, in the dictionary, you would find these bedroom communities. You would find Northern Virginia, because it's basically the entire D.C. Establishment works and lives there. So it's people protecting their jobs, their interests, and probably a lot of former Biden staffers lived there as well.
Also, remember, Virginia not that long ago was a purple reddish state. That in the last decade has really become more of a Democratic stronghold in the state house. Most recently, 2 years ago, we saw the state House of Delegates in Virginia turn blue. You've got pretty much the full, I believe, both senators and the governor and much of the congressional delegation is Democratic now, and it turned Democrat under Barack Obama. That became a Democratic stronghold when Barack Obama turned it blue.
The most recent election, for these midterm elections, Democrats picked up a number of key seats. Alison Spanberger, former CIA operative,
Abigail Spanberger.
Abigail Spanberger, defeated a conservative Republican in Eric Cantor's old district. I mean, there were a number of seats that turned parties, and that was in the past year and a half, past 2 years.
Right. So our CBS News exit polls also found that beating President Trump in November is a priority for voters. At least 6 in 10 voters said they are angry with the Trump administration. So, Leslie, what does that mean for the president's campaign as he looks to get reelected?
Well, you're talking about intensity on each side. So the campaign that is able to activate and turn that energy into voters who get out on a cold day, they leave home and they take their children, and there's a lot of hurdles to getting to the polls and really take a vote in a primary election. They're thinking a lot about this in terms of kind of the horse race, who would do better, and you don't really know. What is fascinating, when you dig deeper into this, it's going to be a contest of two people, right? So when Trump is against somebody like Joe Biden, it makes Nevada less competitive for Republicans. Virginia certainly is off the map. But if it's somebody like Sanders, then we start seeing, a 1988 or even 84 all over again. Republicans start saying, wow, the electoral map looks very red, because in a choice between Trump and Sanders, many people, even conservative Democrats, are going to pull either not vote or pull to the right.
Well, and it was those conservative Democrats like Spanberger who were shaking in their boots at the thought of having Bernie Sanders at the top of the ticket, because that's where those down-ballot races,
Lexington, Spanberger, Scott, all of them.
All of them. That's where they could be impacted, and they want to get reelected too. It might be a presidential year, but every 2 years, members of Congress are up for election.
Not to mention the fact that this really kind of helps Biden do what he needs to do tonight in terms of making up ground in that delegate hall. That's 99 delegates. I think that's the fourth biggest hall behind North Carolina, Texas, and California tonight. So it's a big state for Biden to claim.
Yeah. So here we see when Virginia Democratic primary voters made their decision. You see 48% say the last few days, 52% say earlier than that. Joel, does that signal anything to you?
Well, I think it suggests that, Biden probably had a pretty good infrastructure there before. That's not quite the numbers you would expect if everybody, say, at the last minute were making that decision. It's pretty much a 50-50 split. But I think just the reflection of kind of what part of the Democratic electorate this is Obama-Biden country, essentially. This is Hillary Clinton. This is, I would imagine if you go back and look at the crosstabs, she did pretty well here. This tracks closely to what you would expect Joe Biden to do pretty well at on a night like tonight.
Can I ask you something, Joel? We always show what issue is most important to Democratic primary voters in whichever state. My question is, if in fact you continue to have people talk about electability as being sort of their number one consideration, do issues matter?
Oh boy. Well, this is kind of a pain point issue. I got tongue-tied a little while ago when I was on with you, just trying to think about these voters who are acting like pundits. I think issues are secondary this cycle for a lot of Democrats.
And that's different, right?
Yeah, and that's different. And I don't know if that's a long-term strategy for success for Democrats. Many Democrats, many strategists would tell you that this is a kind of one-term thing or one-time thing because Donald Trump is an existential crisis, right? And that this is a special case where you have to find someone who beats Trump above all else. That's frankly what African-American voters in South Carolina told you with the results of South Carolina this past weekend. So, it seems like voters are telling you that the issues, whether it's economic issues, health care, what remedy on health care, whether it's Medicare for all versus Obamacare 2.0, those are secondary.
Right.
That is an interesting bit of data to come through.
And how does that affect then, if you're a Democratic strategist advising a candidate, when you see this number, that 63% of Super Tuesday Democratic primary voters prefer someone who can beat President Trump, rather than the 34% who say they want him to agree with you, him or her. What does that then do to shape your strategy? Because you can talk about issues, but this notion of electability is such a subjective idea. How do you kind of present your case?
And the job really, look, my job on the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016 was I did ads for African-American voters. And there's a lot of talk, and I don't want to get too deep here for the viewers, about persuasion universe versus turnout universe.
But when you talk about
persuasion, this is the part of the campaign when you really want to start to persuade voters, win them over, give a positive case for why your candidate or why your remedy works. Turnout is the last 6 weeks, get to the polls, here are the early vote days, etc. This feels like this is going to be a turnout election for Democrats. And I think that is going to have repercussions for a lot of different communities. I know African-American communities particularly are very sensitive about that. I would imagine Latino, Latinx communities will probably have a sensitivity towards that. So I do think that kind of portends how, whether it's the Biden campaign or the Sanders campaign, when they decide what their strategy for GOTV is going to be and when that turns on, this will portend a lot for that.
Yeah. I think it also, since 2004, we've seen a lot of these kind of mini splits with Super Tuesdays. So you've got, nobody's really the winner take all like we used to see since they really started putting these together. And that's what the interesting part is. So Bernie Sanders is in that, let's get him out, let's go activate him, get out the vote. in some of his key states because he never stopped campaigning since 2016.